Welcome to Live Without a Car, the show where we talk about everything from the logistics of going car-free to the financial savings and lifestyle benefits. I'm Amanda, and I have lived without a car for nearly a decade now. I am also an economist and your host. And today's episode is a personal one. Why I decided to move to Portland, Oregon, and why living without a car was absolutely central to my decision. So first, I want to flash back to a time when I was actually obsessed with my car and with driving. I was 15 years old at the time, and I had just gotten the keys to my brand new Pontiac Sunfire. I will always remember the day I drove home from the dealership, both hands on 10 and 2 on the wheel, because up until that point in my life, I had never felt so free. Suddenly, I had the ability to get myself to school, to friends, to hobbies, to all things fun. And at this point, there was only upside, especially since my dad footed the bill and helped in maintaining the vehicle. You know, all the boring stuff that no teenager wants to deal with. Now, flash forward 8 years later, after I just finished my bachelor's and was about to finish my master's degree in economics, and I just received my first ever full-time job offer. I was excited, but there was a catch. The offices were located 50 miles, 50, away from my home, which meant that I was now faced with a 2+ hour daily commute. I almost declined the offer, which was working as a budget analyst for NASA, yes, NASA, on Florida's Space Coast. Everybody thought that I would be crazy to say no, and so in this instance, I did listen to everyone, and I accepted the position. At first, it wasn't so bad. I did find myself working for an internationally recognized organization right out of college. I didn't have to explain the company or anything about it. Everybody already knew. And bonus, my commute took me across the Indian River where I got to see dolphins swimming. What a way to start the day. Unfortunately, the excitement wore off about 4 months later, which is right around the time I developed a brand new coffee addiction. After a year and a half of employment, I realized that the job wasn't for me, and I also did not want to relocate to Florida's coast. So I ended up resigning from the position. Once I realized that my car's primary purpose was to get me to and from work and not to and from all the other things I loved, a little light bulb went off in my head. Would it be possible to live without my car entirely? Right after leaving the job, I decided to take a little time off work and regroup and plan my next move while I finished my thesis for my economics master's. I loved traveling at the time, and so I decided to take a solo trip down the West Coast, which initially included Seattle and many parts of California. After I mentioned the trip to a friend, she immediately asked if I was planning to visit Portland, and I believe my exact response was, "Where is that?" In my defense, this happened before Portland became cool. She said, "Oh my God, you just have to visit Portland. You will love it." I looked at my calendar and decided to add a few days to my trip. Well, as it turned out, Portland became my favorite city of all the ones I visited. It was rainy, it was cold, it was February, that's important to note, but I loved the rain, and I was able to get to a lot of places on foot or using the streetcar. Shout out to TriMet's 4T Trail, which I did do. And it had so many of my favorite things in life. Local bookstores, local coffee shops, juice bars, there was art everywhere. And interestingly, an energy that was palpable. This was back in 2011. Something else that I noticed, I actually felt safe going around the city by myself. Something I rarely, if ever, felt in downtown Orlando. After one single visit, I had the thought, I'm going to move here one day. So moving across a country to a city where you don't know anyone is a really big deal, especially by yourself. So I ended up visiting Portland again in 2013 and then again in late 2015. I had applied for a job, and it was a decision I sat on for a full 5 years before making the leap to actually relocate. Now, there are two major reasons I decided to pick Portland over Orlando. So first, let's talk about weather. If you live in a place that is known to have very volatile weather patterns, it is going to be extremely difficult to commute outdoors comfortably for a good part of the year. And as we all know, Florida is hurricane country. And when there aren't hurricanes, there is still extreme heat, humidity, and a high UV index that can be very dangerous to a poster child like myself who has red hair and pale skin. In contrast, in Portland, we do not experience extreme heat or cold typically on a regular basis. Overall, I would consider it a very moderate climate that allows me to be outside almost the entire year without too many issues. And I've tested this. It's been almost 10 years since I've lived here. I've been through the heat dome of 2021. I've been through snowstorms. I've been through it all. And somehow I still managed to get around. So finding a place with a moderate climate by your definition is definitely key and, in my opinion, non-negotiable. Second, let's talk about infrastructure. While I would like to take credit for living car-free all on my own, the reality is that to live well without a car and not be dependent on any single individual, you do need to find a place that incentivizes no car living. If you live in the suburbs and you work in the city and there is no transit, it's going to be extremely difficult to live that way for very long. Orlando's public transit system absolutely exists. People use it. But from my personal experience, it was very difficult to use given that I had long distances between my destinations. So in contrast, Portland is, by all standards, my definition, a very small city. You can actually walk around and cross multiple quadrants of the city in just a few hours. It's not difficult to live without a car. I found that in my few visits. I've now found that 10 years later. Not to say there are not obstacles, which we will go into later, but for the most part, it is dramatically faster to get around via transit in Portland than it was in Orlando. Most of my trips are relatively short, and I have streetcar and bus stops within 1 block of my home. So that's the story of why I moved to Portland, Oregon. If you're thinking about making a change to car-free living, I hope some of what I shared helps. Thanks for listening to Live Without a Car. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, walk slowly and enjoy the scenery.